While some Republicans are obviously standing by Trump, there are others who say it's time to change things. My next guest, former New Jersey Governor Todd Whitman, served in the Bush 43 cabinet as EPA administrator, and she is now calling formally on Donald Trump to resign. She makes out her case in a new piece where she says Trump is unfit to be president, and she's calling on her fellow Republicans to, quote, put aside the GOP label, as hard as that may be, and demonstrate the leadership our country needs by calling on this president to step down. Todd Whitman joins me. This is your first interview since this piece came out. I appreciate you coming to the beat with it.
Pleasure. Good to be here.
What moved you to state this now?
The behavior's been building, the erratic behavior of the president, but particularly the way he handled the meeting at NATO and the European Union, and then the meeting with Putin. I'm sorry, when you diss our allies in the way that he did, treat them the way he did, and then you cozy up to somebody like Vladimir Putin, who is not our friend. He is not going to be our ally. And he, to my mind, really forgot his oath of office to protect and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic. And frankly, Putin is somebody with whom you've got to deal very strongly, and you cannot assume that he is going to be your friend.
Do you think that conduct, which took you to this position, reflects bad judgment on the part of Donald Trump, or potentially something worse?
Certainly bad judgment, without a question. There's bad judgment there. Whether it's anything worse or not, I think we'll find out over time. But, you know, it's hard to know with this president because it changes so that every day, within a day, you'll get 2 or 3 times you get a different story and a different take on things coming out of the White House itself. So it's hard to know whether there's anything more behind it rather than just bad judgment, and the fact that he likes strongmen. I mean, we know that. He likes Kim Jong-un, thinks he's a great guy. I mean, here's somebody who offs half his family and anybody who disagrees with him. Putin is the same way. The kinds of things he's done. I just got back on Saturday from the Republic of Georgia, not our state of Georgia, but overseas, and you see there, I was doing a pre-election mission there, and you see the heavy hand of Russia always in the background. I mean, they're not playing in this election as much as they have in past ones, but the kinds of things that we're seeing today, the fake news, the influence that they're peddling, the fear-mongering that they're doing, it's very reminiscent of what we see happening in this country, and it's very, very disturbing if you care about the United States of America.
You're a former Republican elected official.
I am.
The party has long touted itself on national security, on service, on loyalty to the United States. What do you think when you see this Republican president and his allies say, even if they did collude with Russia to impact the election, that's not a crime?
I find it extraordinarily offensive. I mean, frankly, I don't care whether it's a crime in the criminal code book or not. It is against the best interests of the United States. You do not collude. And for a president to get up there and say, you know, well, maybe I did. Of course, the story has changed right along. First, there was no collusion, and, well, it doesn't matter if I did or not. It does matter. And words matter. That's the other thing about what happened over there in Europe. It's the words that he uses, the language that he uses that confuses people, that undermines our country as a world leader, that has now started to isolate us. And we're going to need allies. They're important. We've worked with them before. We need them. And Putin is never going to be our ally. Neither is Kim Jong-un.
Your counterpart, Chris Christie, you both held the same post, Republican governor of New Jersey. He once claimed to be a moderate. He has been very loyally defending Donald Trump. What happened to Chris Christie?
Well, I mean, I know Chris well enough to think that he believes now what he's saying, and he is a supporter of the Republican president, and I think it goes that far. And I think at some point he was hoping for a little higher position than he's been able to get there. But even so, he is
higher than nothing.
Higher than nothing, yes. I think he was hoping for.
You didn't say it. I said it.
You said it. You said it.
I think he has no position.
He has no position. I was hoping he was going to
nothing.
have a position. But also, it's because he's a loyal Republican. I mean, there are people who will tell you that, well, some of the emails that I've gotten and tweets since that posting, since that op-ed, have been anatomically challenging, shall we say. But the language used, which is really too bad, well, it's 70-30 in favor versus against, but And there have been a few of those who are against who are thoughtful, whose positions I understand, I get it, I respect them. The rest of them, it's just the kind of language you wouldn't let your fifth grader use.
Right.
And when we worry so much about bullying in our schools and the outcome of that, I think we've got the world's #1 bully at the head of the country. Not good. Not good for us long term.
Governor Whitman, you're speaking to some of the reaction you've gotten. I know a lot of other people have been heartened by this at a time where what's happening in this country has raised questions about who will stand up. So it was very interesting to see your piece. I really appreciate you coming on the beat to talk about it.
Thank you.
Hey, I'm Ari Melber from MSNBC. You can see more of our videos right here, or better yet, subscribe to our YouTube channel below. You could have been anywhere in the world, but you're here with us, and we appreciate that.